Hi, this is Caleb Owens with the Insurance Experience. This is episode number 12, and today I have Kandace Johnson. Hi, Kandace. How are you today?
Doing well, Caleb. How are you doing? Thanks for
I'm
having me
doing
on.
thanks. Yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you today.
Thank you. I'm excited as well. It's very exciting
All
to
right,
get the invite.
excellent. So, Kandace, tell me about yourself. Tell me give me a background, like where you came from, how you got started up in the insurance industry.
Sure. So actually, first generation college student, graduated college, kind of ties into the story. So that's why I started there.
Yeah.
Graduated college. I worked for the admissions and recruiting office at UT Arlington for years. And when I came out, they were hiring for a temporary 1 year junior recruiter, basically, because some system changes were happening. About 6 months into that contract, a friend of mine, a best friend at the time, had started working for a large carrier. And she swore that I was in the wrong business with recruiting and I needed to join insurance. I really didn't understand at the time. I didn't really care. I just needed a job, right? That was going to go past
Right.
the contract because my dad was asking me, "You're out of school now. This contract ends in another 6 months. What are you going to do with your life?" And she kept saying, "Hey, you need to join insurance. You'd be a great claims adjuster." I really didn't have that on my radar at all. I just knew they
Sure.
were a great big name company. My dad was pushing for stability. And so I interviewed, went and found out what they had open, wanted to see what that career path looked like. But when I went to talk with them about it, even before an interview, they didn't have anything open in claims. But they were like, "Hey, we have an entry level position, data entry. You'll move up quick. You have a degree. You seem like somebody who would be well fit for claims. So if we can get you in the door, it'll just be a matter of time." So that's how it all started. I started as a
Wow.
data entry person doing what they call policy transfers, and then went on to a call center type area where they opened up a call center for like agency programs, scorecards, fun things like that, and marketing and talking through checks. And then from there, I was there for about 2 years and then got into auto claims. I will
Wow.
be honest, I got into auto claims, but it took a few interviews to get over there. It was definitely a competitive world. So I did auto claims, which were
Really?
PI, yep, bodily injury involved with attorney rep, all the way up from minor claims up to death claims. So it's a very interesting 4 or 5 years of my life, really learning a lot of different avenues outside of about the car, but how to handle those type of claims appropriately and really just get to understand the need of somebody who's going through those kind of claims. If they're hurt, family members hurt, or someone worse has been killed in an auto accident.
Exactly.
I did that for about 4 to 5 years, then got an opportunity to join the property team. Some people in auto didn't quite understand my mindset, but I wanted to get well versed in claims. So I switched over to the other side into property. I moved to Jacksonville, Florida for a while to do that and did property claims in house for catastrophe for the same carrier for a little over 2 years, 3 years. And then I actually went back to auto and got into the field for about a year. But because of the area I'm in, I only traveled with the field for maybe 2 or 3 assignments. The rest of them were here because I'm in a large Dallas-Fort Worth metroplex area, and there's a lot of in-house things to do even when you're in the field. So
Sure.
shortly after that, I did that for right about a year, and some things were restructuring with the company that I was with. So I got an opportunity to join a smaller company and joined a company to go back to property. Situations in auto property, and then joined their team for about 11 months, and they were looking for a manager to move out to South Carolina and start a team. So
Wow.
new team, what we called not younger adjusters, but adjusters they were looking to promote from within, from a call center type atmosphere. And so got to do that. I was out there for a few years and then came back to Dallas to help with building a mixed tenured team for a while with that company. I was with them for about 7 years in leadership, and then not recently, it's been about 2 years now. I left the opportunity from there to go to a third party administrator. It's been a great opportunity for me there to be able to see things from a different perspective. Third
Right.
party administrator is just like a company that has contractors. They hire contractors to help the client get through their needs through like catastrophe times or even daily claims, depending on what's needed. It's been a great 2 years with them. About a year or so in, I was getting into next step leadership, which is what I wanted. And I'm now a
Wow.
director with this third party administrator. So it's been an interesting number of years. It's flown by. I've been in insurance since
Wow.
2005. So it's been great. You see a lot of things.
Wow. Okay. You covered a lot of territory really quickly there. I'm very impressed. That was like so many years, right? Probably like over a decade, 15 years right there
Yeah.
within 2 minutes. Very impressed. So whenever you were in college, what was the recruiter? I wanted to understand that. You weren't talking about Army recruiter. You were talking about for recruiter for the
No,
college?
yes, that's correct. I was
Okay.
a
I thought
student.
so.
Yep, sorry, yeah, not the military. I thought about that route and didn't go that route, but it was a recruiter for the military for the college. When I got
Right.
out of school, I was working for the admissions office and recruiting. I was working for admissions, but as I was getting ready to graduate, our recruiting side for the school was actually going to be changing over like information systems. So they were
Okay.
looking for they didn't call it a junior recruiter, but just recruiters that they could bring on that knew the university very well and also knew
See.
the systems very well. So that's why it was only a year contract.
Okay. Okay. So you were doing that makes a lot more sense now. So you worked directly for the
Yeah,
university.
that's correct.
Okay. And then after that, your friend brought you into the fold.
Into
She was like, hey,
insurance. She did.
okay.
And the story's unfolded ever since.
Yeah. And you really did. You pumped around quite a bit between auto and property and back to auto and back to property. Which one do you like better?
People ask me that all the time. It's very hard to say. They're very different.
Sure.
It's a different avenue. I haven't done leadership on the auto side. I enjoyed the auto side because of some of the different perspectives that it brings. You are really able to be there because I handled the bodily injury end of it through a lot of my career with auto. You're able to be there through some very tough times, right? For a customer, whether it's from bodily injury for them, their child, or a spouse who didn't survive, or someone in a car accident. And that brings a very different perspective to insurance for me. On the property side, it's still the same. You still have a lot of empathetic situations. You're handling minor claims up to maybe total losses where people have lost their entire homes, fires, things like that are completely devastating. So just very different. People ask me that all the time. I have to say, I wish I had an answer. I don't know that I have one. I really have a heart for them both. So really have a heart for them both. I think
that's really interesting just to see that you're well-rounded. That's actually a really good thing. It's kind of like you're saying, you saw both sides of the house, and now you're working for a TPA company. And that's a lot of people don't know. You went into that briefly, but can you go into that a little bit more in depth and detail? Because a lot of people, I'm certain of this, are completely clueless as to what a TPA company is.
Sure.
Why they're important in the industry, because they represent a really vital aspect of the industry. They've grown a lot over the past like 5 or 10 years, I would say. Not just the company you work for, but numerous different companies have really popped up and they fulfill a vital role. So can you elaborate on that?
I sure can. Yep. And you're exactly right. A lot of people don't know what it is. So you'll hear people say that TPA is an acronym and it's a third party administrator. What it is, a company who comes in, they're designed strictly really to come in and help companies when they need to ramp up. In reference, when I say ramp up, like insurance companies, when a catastrophe hits, or when there's times where they just don't have the staffing to handle the volume. So it may not even be a catastrophe. It could just be an influx in claims and they need some additional help. So these companies are designed to help come in and provide independent contractors pretty much that understand that line of business. They come in, they help build those organizations on their end, and then they work together to help make sure that it's a seamless claim process for the customer. And so it is something that's very huge for insurance companies. What a lot of people aren't probably very clear on is that when storms hit or certain things happen and maybe there's a lull in staffing, then you can't really staff up overnight. But with these third-party administrators, they give that opportunity and that fluidity with these companies, whether larger carriers or smaller carriers, no matter the size, to be able to add staffing for multiple volumes, no matter how big or small that is. And that's not easy to do, right? You're talking about equipment, you're thinking about training, you're thinking about how to structure that, right? Mm-hmm. Different things that you really don't think about until you're on that side. So it's been an interesting part to add to my background to see it from the other side, because I have led teams that were through independent contracting companies, but I wasn't on the other side of it. So it's been a nice opportunity for me to see it from the other side for sure, and then get a better understanding at how much value they also bring to the table for these companies.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. That's another thing is thinking about like the homeowner's perspective, because a lot of times they have no clue. They think everybody that calls them works for their insurance carrier. You're like, no, it's a person I interviewed a while back was coined the term claims tribe. And I like that. I like that thinking is that you got all these different kinds of people and different companies, but ultimately we're all there to try to accomplish the same goal, trying to get that family back into their home, get them back in their forever home, get it repaired, rebuilt, do everything we can take care of them in every sense. TPAs really represent a big aspect of that. And you're absolutely right. It fills a niche because was it insurance carrier? You can never, it doesn't make economic sense, right? To have 10,000 people on your staff and then only need, let's say 300 of them or 500, something like that at any given time. So you hit the nail on the head with that, that scalability. So all of a sudden, because you never know, tell me this, do they have TPAs for the auto side?
They do. Yep. So a lot of times people don't hear about that, but same thing. So on the auto side, when there's catastrophes, or same thing if there's some lull in staffing, so that's happened sometimes too, where companies just lost maybe more staffing than they anticipated through attrition that year for whatever reason. And so they need that additional help, whether it's for daily claims or something more tragic which to me, it can be tragic at any level, but something on a larger scale that's occurred. And what a lot of people don't realize, those third-party administrators, they provide for daily handling along with things that may happen on a larger scale. And that's in-house for working the desk and out in the field. So that is where, like you said, a lot of times people are concerned. Maybe Jeff, for example, Jeff comes out to look at my home. I think he's with XYZ carrier. And then he says, oh, I'm really working through CAB carrier. And they're like, wait, I don't want them here. And you're right. It's all one goal. At that point, you're hired streamlined to help make sure the customer is okay. And they're either helping get their home or their car back in the condition it needs to be back to pre-loss, or part of the investigation to determine how that's going to go. So,
we're all working together, trying to accomplish the same goal, which is, like you said, just trying to get them back whole again. And whatever that means, we're trying to get everything together. So if you really think about it like that, different companies, different shirts, different things, ultimately same objectives. But that's really interesting I hadn't heard about a TPA either until about 5 years ago. And then I became well versed in them. They represent I've been to these conferences where they make up like 80% of all the people there are all TPAs now. And there's some really big, well-known companies in that industry, but you absolutely do. You represent a very pivotal and important part of the industry. And so I think that's very important that people understand why that you're needed. You're very critical part of the entire industry, because without you, things wouldn't get done. Whenever you have disasters, or even just like you're pointing out, just on a regular daily occurrence, you're going to have events where people would not be taken care of. So thank you for working there and doing what you do. So it's really interesting. You've worked both sides of that fence. You worked directly for the carrier, and then you've worked. And do you see any other differences like in your day-to-day life with the differences there? Is it pretty similar?
I can't say that there's a lot of difference in the day-to-day. I will say I think it's a different type of stress just depending on the carriers you work for. So I've worked for larger carriers and smaller carriers. And then now working on this third-party administrator side, you do see a lot of different angles, but I believe a lot of it is the same. Claim handling is not easy. When you're talking about managing someone's life decisions and things going forward, or a car that's been damaged, possibly totaled, or just damaged. Everyone doesn't have the money for a deductible. Everyone's car accident, the versions of that isn't always the way one person sees it, right? Sometimes there's four cars involved. And everyone doesn't have enough insurance. On the property side, there's a million things that can be different when it comes to deductibles, to other vendors and things that are involved that just make their lives turn upside down in a moment. And so a lot of it is the same. It's all about customer service, the level of intensity in the day. And I don't want to say unsureness, because I don't care for the word, but you're not sure always what your day is going to go like. What you do know is that you want to provide the most customer service to help them get as far along with the process, no matter what side of the house you're on, auto or property. You're all in it, like you said, for the same goal. But I think the biggest thing is still just trying to manage, one, making sure the top-notch thing is that you're educating the customer and keeping them informed, and you're doing everything within your power to keep the claim moving forward, whether that's investigating, whether it's in vendor involvement, things of that nature. And then I don't want to say the stress, but it can be a mind-taxing job. If you really are giving everything in it every day, it can be taxing. So I think the other thing there is work-life balance. Just making sure that you have time to step away for the breaks, for lunch, and wherever your time off is, you are really disconnecting so that you can be of service at 100%.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. You bring up an important point. That's funny because I've never heard anybody say that, but it's very true. You do have to disconnect from it, because whenever you're dealing with these claims, sometimes, not always, but it's for the actual people involved, to the actual insured, this can be a very traumatic experience. Sometimes it's just like you're saying, like a fender bender or like a minor claim. It shouldn't be that big a deal. But sometimes you have a life's loss, or like you're saying as well, let's say this is a car accident and the car is totaled. People panic, rightfully. It's like that's their primary transportation and they just lost it. They don't know what's going to happen. And if you've not been through these circumstances, and so for you on the other side of the house, you've got to be able to disconnect from all that and say, okay, I'm going to do everything I can to help. But on the same hand, I've got to be able to disconnect from at the end of this day. I have time with my own family and my own mental health as well, be able to disconnect, walk away from that, and then come back into it the next day. And that, I'm sure, that can be more difficult to do at different times. Let's say you're dealing with a large cat event or something of that nature. That could be a lot more difficult because people literally sometimes they don't have any home to go back to, or you've got so many different things. It's got to be difficult to just walk away from it.
100% is. And that's something that I would say anybody that's considering a position in claims, at some point you will find yourself, it's a hard tearaway, right? So depending on who you work for, if you're paid hourly, if your salary, things are going to pull at you in your heartstrings. Sure. I can still remember the first claim I ever handled that was a death claim of a parent, and her kids and husband were waiting at home and having to figure out for months when I would hear from him to have that conversation while looking at the photos, and my heart breaking for him and his family when we got that call. And so when we talk about definitely taking those breaks, when you step into claims and you're open to being a part of either the catastrophe team or available to those longer hours, you know what you're walking. Well, you may or may not when you initially get into it, but you understand what you're walking into. And it is typically for X amount of time. And when I say that, it's hard to, I don't want to say it's hard to disconnect, but there are things that will always pull at you. So as an adjuster, my entire time, whether auto or property, there are things that will still, you'll wake up in the middle of the night. Oh my gosh, did I take care of that for Miss? Really? People don't think about that, but there are things, and there's claims that will always stick with you. I can think of things that have been concerning. I can think of clearly the death claims that I mentioned that has always stayed on my heart, and that family, and then just different things through things that have happened. I can think of a vandalism claim where I can remember the people calling about their home being shot up. They didn't even know, they weren't involved. They didn't know who these people were. They don't know if they were out for them or somebody else. And when they sent the photos, it was absolutely terrifying to see. Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine. Or sometimes it stings and it's closer to home than people realize. So there's so many things that come out of these claims that you learn about and you hear about that you really do. When I say take the time away, it's not because you don't want to be there for the customer, but you do want to be able to be 100% there. And there are claims that will stay with you throughout your entire career and probably the rest of your life. That work-life balance pull away is very tough. And being a part of catastrophe, I can't tell you, in claims and in catastrophe, some of the hardest working people you'll ever meet. And their hearts are huge. And same thing. They'll still have those same story, different stories for different things. And they'll tell you, I may go home. Some of the people that are in the field, they sleep where they can. Like sometimes there's not availability for them either when they go into those areas, but they're like, hey, this is exactly what I do this for. And so whether they're at the desk or in the field, they're equally as important to be able to help the customer. And so try to take that time away or a break even, because sometimes it's just a heartbreaking story that you get that you just need a moment because you have a moment. So I say that to say a lot of people don't think of that, but I can remember in auto, that was one of the things they told me as I was learning more things and getting more complex claims, you'll get a claim that's going to come across your desk one day, Kandace, and you may need to step away from it. And I was like, oh no, everything's been fine up to this point. And then I got a claim where some kids were in a car that they had been part of the military, newly a part of the military. They had gone out to celebrate and had an accident on the way home. And the story of what happened alone before I could get a hold of any of them was heartbreaking. So their treatment over the course of 2 years, there are just things that stay with you. And so that's why I say, like, when I say step away, I hope nobody from a customer side hears that and thinks we mean that in the way of not handling their claim. More of there are things that are tough to handle as just being empathetic. And that's not saying there's any concern with leaving it at the desk. You understand what those people, or you try to understand as much as possible as to what those people are going through.
No,
So
you're absolutely right. I'm glad you're talking about this because you're absolutely right. You're dealing with these situations like that. And you got to think about yourself as well. It's work-life balance, right? That can be really difficult. You bring these things home whether you want to or not. So sometimes, just like you're saying, things will stick with you for years and years. We provide the temporary housing space. Whenever you're talking about disasters or like a large loss for families, we're always there trying to take care of them as best we can. We really try as best we can to take into account the insured situation. Yeah. So for instance, you mentioned like the deductible, because sometimes they've got a deductible they've got to pay for their house to get that repaired. But then on top of that, whenever we're trying to get them into temporary housing, they may need to come out of pocket for $2,000 or $5,000 to get into another house, not to mention their credit and everything else. And that can be like, for some people, it's just like they can't do it. Like, just no, they don't have the money to be able to do that. And so we'll actually pay for it. We'll pay for it all. We go on there, we co-sign for them to get them in the property because they can't get into the property otherwise. It's not everyone, luckily, that's in this situation, but there are a substantial amount of people that don't have, surprisingly, $5,000 sitting around. And in addition to covering everything else that they have to pay for, then you're expecting them to pay for all these other things. And a lot of times as well, whenever they go through a large loss like this, that can be financially taxing on them. Like that just drains, because of so many different things, that drains their bank account reserves, mentally taxing as well. So they're, like you said, sometimes they lose people in these events or people are injured and they're not thinking clearly. They're in this kind of just distracted frame of mind, like just mentally, they're just all over the place and they can't think like they normally would. So I think it's kind of part of our job as claims professionals to guide them back into the fold. Hey, here, we're going to get you set up. We're going to get you taken care of. Try to get them back into normalcy as much as you can. Because if you can get them into a home, get them back into a regular home and say, okay, hey, get your life back to normal. I think most people's life will fall back into place and they do get more comfortable. Then they can start thinking clearly. So we'll never ask them to sign any documents or do anything until we get them into a hotel room.
nice.
It's just, to me, it's not fair to say, hey, I know that you just lost this house. Sometimes they're standing on the side of the road as their house is burning. You can't, or should not, let's say you should not go to them and say, hey, I need you to sign all these documents. I need you to do all this other stuff. They don't know you as well. And so I think it's appropriate just to get them into a hotel, get them taken care of. And then later, the next day or 2 days later, when they're getting a good night's rest, hopefully, then you can come back at them and say, hey, we need all these documents signed whenever you can, sign them online. So it's about taking care of people, like you said.
And that is a tough balance. I always told my adjusters, part of the hard part is there is a policy in place that we have. That's our playbook. We can't go past that because we don't have the option to do that. But it is a puzzle because most people that haven't had to use their policy, or even if they've had a claim before, it could be a different type of claim. There's different parts of it. So for me, I've always explained to my teams, the policy and loan is like a completely separate puzzle to an insured. You want to make sure you educate them, number one, on what applies and if it doesn't, why. But when you think about the things that can happen, even in a home, as simple as a pipe break, but the pipe may not be covered. And it's okay, now they've got their deductible, they've got to cover the pipe. And I understand that people are, as a homeowner, they should know, I understand, but realistically, people don't always, what I have found in my years of insurance, most people don't understand what they're really paying for. Not because it's bad, it's just a lot of people, who's going to sit down and read, most people aren't going to sit and read a policy front to back. And that's
right.
Not but that's why I say, I try to remind them that policy is really a puzzle. It may be our playbook, but that's not their play. That's not their
right.
playbook. And we want to take that off their hands to ease as much as we can when we start to educate them on it. But also we need that human empathy part, because there are going to be things we can't handle. But at the end of the day, most customers will understand the bond between both if we handle it correctly and you're human about it. Sometimes it's still hard conversations, but there's a lot of other outside factors. A lot of times you don't even know are going on for people. Just so many things to take in, I feel like. But I feel like if you can get the right people in claims handling and helping understand that it's customer service first, but two, understanding that policy, how to apply it, but also how to have those conversations. They're not always easy conversations, but a lot of times if we can help the customer understand, but also share with them where to locate it, Because some of them do
Right.
just want to know, hey, I really don't know you from the next person. And maybe they've had a bad experience in insurance, and all they
Yeah.
really want to make sure is what they're being told is the truth, because
Yeah.
maybe they didn't know that before they bought the policy. And there's so many things still not covered under the policy. It still makes it worth having. So I'm not saying that, it's just a lot of things that people don't always know and understand.
Yeah.
So that's where we should be able to help bridge the gap. Hopefully.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I'm thinking about kind of like you're mentioning is that pipe may not be covered, but, and there's a lot of instances like that where, for instance, you have like flood insurance. If you've got a flood, most of the time, that's not covered by your insurance. It's not covered at all. You need a separate policy for that. A lot of people do not understand that at all. So that's totally separate. Same thing with earthquake. You've got an earthquake happen. Sorry, you got an earthquake policy, a separate insurance policy for earthquakes. So if you do have earthquakes in your area, then you need to think about that you might want to take out a policy for that, and that's not covered as well. So there are things that it seems so simple, doesn't it? It's just, hey, you're covered my house. No, there's so many different complexities and different things that can happen, and there's things that are not covered by this particular type of insurance that they have, and they don't understand all of that. They're, like you said, there are a lot of people who are not going to sit there and read the policy front to back. And even if they did, they probably wouldn't even
Well, I was going to say that too. Even if they are open to doing that, there's even policy trainings. I can think of different times in policy trainings. There's, oh my gosh, I got to read that again. There's a reason why we advise the adjusters, anytime there's a claim, go in and actually read that person's policy before you apply any kind of coverage or talk about what's not covered. There's a reason normally why there's steps for when there's a part denial or full denial, that more eyes than one are normally on there, right? Because you want to make sure you're talking about people's homes, whether they're renting, whether they're buying, and then their possessions inside, which have a whole nother set of policy language, not include their cars. And sometimes they have claims that include both. A lot of times with the storms now, somebody's car is damaged and someone's home is damaged. Or if it's a vandalism claim, the same thing. And so you just want to try to ease the blow where you can for people. And you really want to not just to me, like adjusters that just handle a claim and get it done. We haven't done our job. We need to build that connection where we can. We need to build the rapport, and we need to make sure we try to help them understand through the process by sharing what's covered, what's not covered, and being as transparent as we can through the process.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. You make a very good point, because you're almost like a shrink as well to some extent. You're trying to help people out and not be just, I wouldn't want to say blatant or just rude about it, because this is their livelihood. A lot of times is their biggest investment as well. If they've lost their home, that can be, for obvious reasons, very devastating to them. And the same thing with their car as well. If you lose your car and that's your primary transportation means, that can be absolutely horrible. I went through an experience where I had a car and it was a rental car. I was renting it out through an app called Turo. Lost the car, was completely totaled. Never saw it again. It was just gone, just off the face of the earth. I never saw the car again. And it took a month to ever hear back from the carrier as to what happens. To be honest, even though I didn't need, it was not my primary, it was in a different even, and it was not my primary transportation means. It was a month later before I ever got confirmation back on what happened. And so I was sweating bullets. I was like, are they going to just deny me entirely and just not pay for anything? What's going to happen? So your thoughts run wild whenever you don't hear anything back. So I definitely agree with you on the communication aspect side, is that if you can communicate to people, even if it's just to tell them, hey, we're going to get you taken care of. Everything is covered. We're going to get you taken care of. Just give us some time. That's not hard to do. It doesn't cost much money, but it puts people's mind at ease. I think that's really important as well.
It is. It's huge. Communication is one of those parts. It's really priceless in this type of process. Sometimes people that call, they're upset because things have taken longer than they expected. And then once they talk to a leader or their adjuster, they're like, hey, even if it's still not where I need it to be, or it's not going the direction I want, it'd be nice to at least have the understanding and communication. A lot of times people just want to know what's going on, and they're owed that. That's not something, to me, I tell my teams, that's not a prize. That should be automatic. Like, they're paying a premium for an insurance, regardless of what that looks like. we owe them to keep them informed.
Yeah.
And anybody would want that. And so that's some of the conversations I've had with my teams too, when we're talking about customer service. Put yourself in their shoes. Or even I've done exercises on team calls where I was like, let's talk about some customer service things that have happened. Just in the last week, where have you been? What's happened? What's gone well? Why didn't it go well? I've shared my own experiences through things. And even when I've had claims, the same thing, because it's always interesting to see how different companies handle things or what goes really well. And
Right.
so it's just an interesting dynamic. It's an interesting position for sure when you're in the claims life. And then when you're dealing with someone through so many different stages of things that can go well or can go awry. You meet you hear a lot of different stories of people. I can think of one couple that years ago, they had bought their first home. It was a celebrate one of their first birthdays, and something goes wrong in the house. It was a water leak that they couldn't find. And like she told me, we spent everything to get this house, Kandace. It was our dream house. Now we have 2 adopted kids. We're excited. We have a first birthday party on, I think it was that Saturday. It was about a week out. We can't figure out what's going on with the water, and we have nothing else to spend. What do you?
They were just capped out on their finances.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so you really have to then, again, whether you put yourself in their shoes, we have a service to provide. We want to help them as much as possible to getting back to where they were and applying the policy correctly so that we're doing them a service service in one way or the other. It's not always, I'm sure people are going to see this and be like, it's not always positive insurance, but you want to be mindful of things. That was one of the things I can remember as I was talking to them through their process, was just asking, how are your kids adjusting? How did the party turn out? And were you able to get it moved? Just because they shared it with me, so I knew it was very important. You don't want to overstep those. If people don't want to open the door, it's okay. But for the ones that do, there's probably a reason. They're letting you know that frustration because that's the biggest concerns. And I've always told people in claims, we've got to really listen. We get a lot of people that they listen to respond. And you see that meme everywhere, right? Listening to respond is listening to really understand. And that makes a huge difference in this claims world.
I think it makes a difference in a lot of different things as well. I agree with you on that. Just like waiting to talk instead of actually listening to what they're saying, they're just waiting to talk. So then their response has nothing to do with what they just said. So you can tell that. You're absolutely right. That's interesting. So where do you see, I was going to ask you this, if you don't mind, can you give me, you're a director now, correct?
Yes, sir.
Like, give me a walk through your life as a director in this large TPA company.
Sure. My day is very different every day. It's hard to plan, but I actually lead for a few different accounts right now. So it's interesting. I have one in the US and one outside of the US. So it's a learning opportunity for sure. But my day, honestly, there's multiple things. It's continuing to grow leaders, of course. I do try to get involved to get to know our adjusters as well. I believe that as a leader, it's very important to understand everybody's importance is important no matter what level they're at. I've been an adjuster. We have adjusters at different levels. I do big meetings with everybody. I do things with our team leads and managers. And then also project management work, right? You're always looking for what else we need to do to get ready. We're around the corner from cat season for some of our clients that maybe that haven't been in areas where a cat is hit. So we're prepping for those things, trying to be ready. Also trying to make sure, for me in those situations, we also want to make sure the adjusters we have on those accounts, their desks are as good as they can be. Because we never know when Mother Nature's going to drop us a surprise. Like I was actually just telling them that on a call earlier. We just want to make sure their desks are as good as they can be. Anything that we haven't handled, I give normally directions around making sure we're getting through those in a week. But my day varies, honestly. I'm on calls for between staffing, a few different accounts that I help with and handle, and then meeting with other leaders. It looks very different. And then I like to sit in on meetings that my managers have, right? To make sure what they're sharing with their teams, not all the time, but just to drop in and say hi, see how things are going, so it can be a fly on the wall. In addition to that, it just depends on what else comes up, to be honest. Sometimes the day goes as planned and sometimes it's different. I sit in on staffing calls, so I know when other clients are looking for people. So if I do have to scale down, one of the things my TPA is really big about is if we have to scale back, we try to see if there's another account that maybe has an opening, so that we're not just asking them to leave or that we no longer have anything available. We may be able to say, hey, mentioned you to our recruiters. They're looking at your background to see if you fit any needs for any other clients that are going to have something coming up. So those calls as well are really important to try to help keep people working where they would like to stay working. Sometimes they welcome the break, and then sometimes they'd like to move on to another account if this one no longer has space. So it's very different from day to day. I meet with my boss as well, who is a VP on occasion, sometimes planned, sometimes unplanned. And then of course, in touch with our field partners. And then we also have some teams where we have estimate reviewers. So I like to check in with them, and we're working on making sure people are ready for CAT. So starting to make sure we have people ready in the background and they're where they need to be. Additional trainings. This is a great time to do additional trainings too. So some of those things are being handled right now.
So it's right now, it's July. This is, like you're saying, this is the preseason, if you will. You getting everything ready. I was thinking about what you said. You're trying to clear their desk off, if in a sense, not physically, but you just mean handle all their cases that they've got going on, get everything all wrapped up, because whenever this CAT hits, you want them to be focused on that. They can't be distracted with some other claim that they haven't finished up on yet.
And it won't always be that they haven't finished that claim up. For me, I mean it more from the perspective of sometimes as we have to offboard people for a number of reasons, or they need to leave, you've got new inventory in. So I want to make sure if somebody's saying that claim had been worked to fruition to the furthest point for now, you need to double check that and make sure that's really where it's at. Maybe we're waiting, even their own desk, but were you waiting on an engineer? Is the pending note, are the pending notes updated? Have you really worked everything that's in there? Any engineer reports in there? Do we have the summary in the file? So there's all these things where it's not really necessarily getting it off their desk, but I want to make sure they're in tip-top condition. If we have anything that's been escalated, have we made sure everything has been handled for that customer as far as we can take it until maybe we're waiting on documents back, or do we need to be communicating with the contractor? If there's concerns on a roof and we need an additional inspection, is that in process? Where are we at in that process? Let's keep the communication, make sure that line is open, have gone out. And so it's just those kind of things where I want to make sure things have flowed the way they need to. Not the way they want to, the way they need to, and appropriately. And then also making sure licenses are ready to go and things like that. So it can be interesting days for sure. But yeah, when I talk about their desk being clean, it's really not about getting claims off their desk. It's just about making sure they've really truly been worked to the furthest point. They could have to be out at any point, but also the customer, if a storm hits, and many customers will tell you when a storm hits, hey, I know another storm hit, I'm probably not gonna be top priority. That should be the case, right? Their customer, regardless, whether they're in a new storm or one that's already happened. And we want to continue to handle their claim as we need to, and hopefully above their standards, not underneath them. So that's really more of what I'm thinking of when I make sure their desks are hopefully in order.
Wow. No, you make a very good point. That's really interesting. And then because right now you're gearing up, this might be a very active hurricane season. It's at least what I'm getting the feeling of. I've never heard that from the National Hurricane Center, but this makes a lot of sense that things would heat up quite rapidly coming into next month. So yeah, you guys are gearing up for that. It sounds.
Indeed. Yep. Because if you really can't afford to wait until Mother Nature hits, and sometimes when she's swirling or somewhere out there, and there's all these projections of where she may or may not go, that may or may not happen. But that's not really a good time to then say, I hope you made sure everybody was taken care of, as far as you needed to have them handled. Should be normal. It's normal practice anyway, but it never hurts as a reminder. Sometimes as pendings start to dwindle, you just want to make sure that things are in order. So that's really big for me. And then I like to make time to get to know some of that core staff that it's getting down to, because, hey, you're going to probably be with us as a storm hits. And so you'll probably be some of the first line hitters as soon as we start getting things and bouncing ideas on what worked last year for us in CAT, what you felt like didn't work. What else do you need from us? I actually just got off a call with one of the teams at 12 o'clock Central asking, instead of doing some great PowerPoint show, I won't say great, that sounds like I'm patting myself on the back, but some PowerPoint slide, called me and said, hey, I just want to talk for a little bit. I went around a little, called on names and talked around some things that had changed. This particular client is a Florida client. Wanted to talk a little bit around some things that have come out with those Senate bills and how they're making sure they're hitting those metrics. Just openly have some conversation, and then talk around just some fun, just a little light and easy too. Like I said, how's everybody doing, and anything going on anybody want to talk about? And then just ended it. And I said, hey, next week we'll do a quiz on some of the Senate bill stuff that came out. But while we had a little time to have a little light meeting, I thought it was a good time to do it.
Wow.
There's some deadlines to hit. So every now and then you want to be able to let them relax a little bit.
Wow. Now, I'm just curious. You mentioned Mentioning that, I presume you meant the Florida Senate. And so you guys have to keep up on this type of stuff. I would presume now that makes sense because it impacts you. Is that correct?
That is correct. So anytime, so there are certain states too that have interest and penalty payments if things aren't paid on by a
Oh,
certain
wow.
time or reviewed
Yeah.
correctly the first time. Yeah, there are different things like Texas has Texas POC, prompt payment of claims. Florida has
Mhm.
Florida interest calculators for that same reason. If things are not paid appropriately and timely, then there's interest that insurance companies have paid.
Wow.
So just talking through those things as reminders,
Mm.
there were some highlights and shout outs I wanted to give in reference to some people I was seeing doing really well with some of those updates, and then talking through what's working well for some of y'all. How are you making sure you're hitting those compliance factors without your team lead getting to it first? Because sometimes you hear something else on a meeting and the light bulb goes off. Oh, I'm not doing it that way, but that probably would help me look at that sooner or remind me of different things. So I like to definitely let them collaborate as one. And then sometimes it's nice to have a call with everybody and not have to be just 100% strategic. Let them have a little bit
No,
of
no,
time
I
to talk to each
understand.
other and other things and not look through a PowerPoint. So, yeah.
You got to be lighthearted at some point as well. I see
Right.
that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, we're like you said, storm season is it's knocking. So we don't know what that'll look like this year. And like I told him, hey, next week may not be as lighthearted. Clearly, I'll have to I already told you there's a quiz coming. So I just while
Right.
we could this week, it was nice to have a little bit of a
Wow.
lighter.
No, that's really interesting. Just thinking about all that because you guys have a lot of things to keep up on. You're nationwide. You're having to deal with different carriers, different states, different legislations. You have quizzes on that. That's fascinating and that would be important. That'd be really important to keep up on, depending on different states, what's going on.
Compliance is not something that you can lightly monitor, should I say. And so
Mhm.
every company has different ways of keeping their tabs on things, but even compliance status letters, there are things that are very serious that have to be hit that are reviewed when there's complaints or other concerns that come up. They want to make sure you're hitting those marks and those which we should be anyway, but it's a good
Right.
way to make sure things are in line. And definitely a lot of the interest and penalty payment things that have come out, I hate to say it, but they're in place because unfortunately a lot of times it wasn't being done. And
Right.
probably after so many complaints and concerns, the states wanted to make sure that people were going to be made whole and that insurance companies weren't taking, I don't want to say advantage, but they got put in place for a reason. Texas has prompt
Right.
payment of claims. When I worked Texas claims for years, you had to go back and review those things and make sure that you were compliant. So same thing going
Wow.
on with things that have changed to Florida.
Wow. Really interesting stuff. I'm really fascinated. Where do you see your future and the future of the industry? Where do you see things moving towards?
A few things there. My future, multiple things. I would definitely like to continue to move up the ladder for insurance. I've loved my
There's
claims
higher
life.
than you?
There is. I report to a VP. She was an AVP
Wow.
before, so I'd be glad to become an AVP or a VP
Wow.
for sure. And then there's executive VP. So there's definitely chains definitely
Different
higher than I
levels
am.
up.
So wouldn't mind that. But also on the side of that, I know you mentioned I could say a little bit personal too. So I'm also really working towards getting into motivational speaking and
Oh,
working
wow.
on becoming a life coach as well. So there's
That's
just
cool.
multiple layers of things that I also want to do. So I think there'll be some interesting times probably to come soon.
Wow. I'm very impressed. Very impressed
Thanks.
with you all the way around.
But I will say, in reference to what you asked about the insurance world, I don't know if this will go over well with some people in the audience, but I know there's a lot of things coming with AI and businesses changing.
Yeah.
And I just have to say, I hope to see the insurance industry stay where people are very heavily involved on the side of
Mhm.
helping people, because I think there's certain things, no matter how much you try, you can't get AI or a computer to have that same human element. So I
Yeah.
hope that I remember when I got into claims, we had claim secretaries. And I'm sure
Mhm.
at
Oh,
some point
really?
AI and these different things come to play. A lot of people are being replaced by computerized type things or AI. So I really hope to see the insurance industry continue to take a route of educating people, but also staying with the human element. And that may sound a little far fetched, but I think it's very hard
I don't think it's far fetched at all. I think you
to
hit the nail on the head. I think you're absolutely correct. 100%. With that, I definitely, from my opinion, my very humble and very small opinion, in the sense of what I've seen, some companies 100% are going to do what you just said, is that they're going to keep more of a human element in insurance. Whether that costs them or not, they're going to stick with that route for a variety of different reasons. The insurance industry is very old-fashioned in a lot of ways. They like the way things are, and they're very slow to adapt and change. But however, you worked auto, so you know about how things have changed a lot in auto with how they're using, I don't necessarily know about AI per se, but how they're using phones now to be able to review the car accidents without the field adjuster going out. And that's going, and it already has changed things a lot. I definitely see that there's good things with that. Absolutely. But on the same hand, that's going to reduce the number of your payroll for obvious reasons. You don't need 500 adjusters to go out to each car accident. You can just do it with one, and he can review it. And especially now with AI systems, they can review a lot of that work online. We're seeing that now with drones, in the drones taking over. And that's more for like outdoor stuff, like flying over, looking at roofs and things like that. Inside of the houses, they're doing the same technology that cars have with taking where they've got like a leak or something like that, especially if it's a smaller claim, and they can review it with their phone and then send that in. And so, yeah, things are going to change. I don't see that no matter what we do or anyone does, we're not going to stop the change. But I definitely see some companies. It's interesting. You see a huge contrast in different companies. Some companies take more of an approach like, hey, you know what? We're going to stick with the way that we've done it before, and we're going to stay that same way. And then other companies, and I'm sure companies, these particular carriers, are much more progressive, not to mention progressive. They literally are. They're in the forefront of technology, and they're pushing things as aggressively as they can. And a lot of that comes down to the bottom line as well. It's not necessarily a matter of anything else other than they're protecting their bottom line. And I see it from both sides. I definitely see it from what you're saying. When I respect your opinion of that we need to keep a human element in everything that we're doing. There needs to be humans involved with doing this, because this is something this is not a computer program. We're not talking about digits on a screen. We're talking about people's lives. So whatever that opinion is, that's my opinion.
That's a great point. And so when I say that, yeah, I definitely mean more from the back end, from the angles that make sense. For the technology piece that makes sense to help the customer sooner, then I'm all for that. I've definitely been piloted with some programs with companies I was with before who did do some things with the video estimating, like you said, with Inside House, pipe break, exact analysis. I actually had a program called, what was it, Exact One or One Exact or something years ago that I was with another company, and we started using that to actually see, could we trim down some of our costs with some of the third-party administrators, sending someone out for some of these claims, and then we would supplement things on the back end where things were missed, and we were able to help our customer a lot sooner get payments out. And I'm all for that, where we can do things that make sense. I think for me, I mean, on some of the parts where I can imagine them attempting to go robotic to some element where it's no, you still need the human factor there. But with the drones, I think that's amazing. Like the things they can do with hailstorms and things, and probably get a really good view of somebody's roof and get an idea. The thing is also then getting the other things in the interior, you could do the same way, like you were saying, with the technology and take the photos. People that have some really good estimating skills can do that from the desk. So then you still have a human element, but I'm sure there'll be a way to automate that at some point too, because there's some people working on those kind of things where you can get some estimates together without having so many additional things involved or people. But so I think that's where my thing is, maybe more of the complex things, having that human element there, because I don't think you can have AI, or I don't know the right terms here. I'll be honest. I'm not that technical.
No, but it's all the same.
Yeah, technology. I think you heard about a lot of some of the floods that had happened. A lot of companies were using drones to see total losses so they could get payments to, and I love that because people are in the middle of devastation. So I definitely wouldn't say they're like, oh my gosh, no, wait, send out a ton of field adjusters. I'm sure some field adjusters. Don't say that, Kandace. But in that respect, a lot of times there's people that are being trained specifically to use those and read that data. So there's still a human element somewhere. Right. On a lot of those things, although I'm sure at some point, again, there'll be programs as the drone is taking photos, there'll be a macro somewhere in the background calculating this all up. So for me, I think more of the human element where it's needed for the compassion piece, but where the technology needs to align with the customer to help get things handled faster, I'm on board with that. When we did this pilot program with another company that I worked with years ago, like I said, it was with Exact, and I can't remember the exact name, but what you're talking about with the phones, they can take the photo. We had a team who was starting that got trained up better on estimates, so they could literally just work on that pilot. And we saw such a huge turnaround with customers to be able to get payments out. And they were okay if there were other supplements, because there were things they realized they're not going to estimate everything exactly. You say, hey, is that the size of a pizza box or a size 8 shoe box? You think about these creative ways, but they know when the contractor comes in and cuts out that drywall, it's probably going to go bigger than that. And some people are going to get that, some aren't. And they understood that it was a process, but they also appreciated being able to get that payment to get things started a lot sooner. And then we could verify cause of loss a lot of times, because someone's wall is still open. You can see the frozen pipe that was just replaced, and they have a photo of it and what a frozen pipe looks like. So there's all these great things that can come from the technology piece added with claims. So I don't want to make it sound like that. I'm just saying there's also a human element in some aspects that I hope that we don't go away from.
Yeah, I agree with you. I definitely see
great discoveries. Sorry, no, I was just saying, I think that'll be some great discoveries continued with seeing things with the drones and getting certified. Because I a lot of hard people talk about they're having to get certified to be able to do like the drone estimates and things. So it's not as simple. Like, people will hear that and think, oh my God, they're just like, no, there's seriousness behind there. Like, they're getting certified to do that and all these other things. Sorry. Well, go ahead.
No, you're absolutely right. I like you talking about it. Your point on with that subject is it's very serious. And there's a lot of positive things. I'm glad you mentioned that. It's just, I see it like from two sides. I definitely see a lot of positive things, like you're saying, making things quicker. At the end of the day, that insured is going to get money in their pocket. And from our side, we can handle things much quicker. This means that they're able to get into a hotel much faster. We can reduce the amount of time. We can get them funds to go out to eat, get things taken care of if they need it. So they're getting better services in that sense. But I definitely agree with what you were saying earlier as well, is that there's a human element, and we shouldn't be taking that human element out of the equation. So you still need a person to talk to them, and you shouldn't take that away. You should still have that person in there to talk to them and to have the compassion to understand what really happened. So I see it from both sides, and I definitely agree with you though.
Thank you. And I think there's a balance there too, because there's definitely going to be a population that's, I could definitely talk to someone that's just getting, if it's not maybe a certain type of claim, certain severity, where they can do something with someone that's maybe something that's more computerized or technology wise and not need a human element there. But also the other part is, as we go to a lot of this technology, I just hope that companies are compassionate, because there's still a lot of people that aren't going to necessarily be there right away, right? As we were doing that pilot before with the phones and things like that, there were a lot of people that still and we had to have smartphones for that. Like, people had to have either a smartphone or an Android. There are people that still have flip phones. And I know people will go, what do you mean? But there are people also that maybe aren't as well versed in wanting to do those things, or they maybe need help with that for whatever reason. And so just as long, I hope that we continue to keep people that can go out and do things to help people, because there's going to be people still that doesn't meet their need. So
you're absolutely right. I 100% agree with you. We've actually seen that in our what we do as well. And also I heard from another director as well in another company that he was saying that his mom was actually had a loss, and she's older, obviously, and they're doing everything now with the phones. So if you want to file a loss and do all these different things, if you don't have a phone, it makes it much, much more difficult. And so there are people like that are being left behind in a sense. And I've seen it with what we do as well, with an older gentleman who wanted a paper lease. He wanted everything in paper, and it seems, okay, no big deal. I didn't think it was that big a deal. Sure, we'll give you a paper one. You can't. It was really difficult. It drove the costs up. It wasn't just like $5 or $10. It was hundreds of dollars per month, because we couldn't get a paper lease for him. So you end up you have to go with other companies that are going to charge you more money, because a lot of the companies, and this is a small town in North Carolina. It wasn't like this is in New York or some major city or something. And there was not many people that were renting places there that would do a paper lease at all. And you're like, wow, really? Because I remember just a few years ago, this DocuSign, all these different companies were just coming out. And now it's like, you cannot get a paper lease. It's almost like obsolete. So that's definitely come about already.
Yeah, for sure. Indeed.
But Kandace, I really enjoy you. I wouldn't mind whenever you're VP or president someday of a company. You never know. Don't write yourself short. I'm sure you haven't. I like your ambition, and you're going to be a life coach as well. I like that you have multiple things going. That's definitely, I think it's a good thing for everybody. So I'm very impressed with you all the way around. And it was a lot of fun talking with you. Hopefully I can have you on again in the future whenever you're president of a company.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I've enjoyed talking with you as well, Caleb. I appreciate it.
Okay. All right. You have a good day.
Thanks. You too.
Hi, this is Caleb Owens with Premier Insurance Housing. Do you need help with ALE or temporary housing for your policyholders or clients? If so, we would love to help out. We offer a wide range of services, and we offer our services nationwide. We offer mobile homes and fifth wheels to single-family homes and apartments. To request our services, just click the link in the description or give us a call, 405-604-0786.